student-led organization that was established in fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging mentorship can be, especially in the middle of a pandemic. And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to everyone who wants to attend. We realize that finding mentorship and guidance in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation students, people that lack the financial resources, or just that don't know anyone in the medical field. One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home or wherever you are. We typically have events on most Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. PST, and occasionally on Saturdays as well. And if you aren't able to attend the event as it is happening, all of our sessions are recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel after they are done, so that they can be viewed there at your convenience. After you have attended our event, you can log onto our website and complete the quiz about today's session. And if you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today. And finally, if you want to stay connected with our upcoming events and want to tell your pre-med friends that are struggling to get shadowing about PreMedCC, our social media accounts are all at PreMedCC on all the platforms that you see here. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Madeline to do the introduction for our speaker.
Hi, everyone. Today, we're proud to host Dr. Alexis Woods. Dr. Woods has had a non-traditional journey to medicine. At 16, she was emancipated due to an unsafe home environment. She then dropped out of high school in order to work full-time. In her 20s, she began working seasonal travel jobs in places such as Alaska, Baja California, and Europe. When Dr. Woods returned to the United States, she decided to reconnect with her teenage dream of becoming a surgeon. She moved to California and enrolled in Cabrillo Community College with her sights set on transferring to UC California, Berkeley. She was successful and graduated from Cal with a Bachelor of Arts in Molecular Biology with an emphasis on neurobiology. After graduation, Dr. Woods spent 2 gap years preparing for the MCAT and working in a clinical setting. She then began medical school at UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine at the age of 34. She is now in her 3rd year of general surgery residency at the UC Davis Health System. Dr. Woods hopes to pursue a fellowship in colorectal surgery, and she has a particular interest in improving surgical outcomes for the LGBTQ+ community, and particularly for transgender or non-binary patients. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Woods.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks for that introduction. And thank you, Jubin, for asking me to participate, and welcome to everyone. I'm gonna share my screen and then technologically challenged at times. All right, and then just let me know if there are any technological issues. So yeah, again, I'm Alexis, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my story and kind of my path, and then let me make sure I have the chat so I can see. Okay, cool. Sorry, let me move this so I can see better. All right, so yeah, I grew up in Florida, in Jacksonville, and got emancipated at 16. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a surgeon. I didn't know anybody in the medical profession in my family. There were no doctors. My aunt, who lived far from me, was a nurse, but I wasn't really influenced. We really didn't talk to her very often. I had a friend in high school whose dad was a neurologist, but that was kind of the extent of my exposure to medicine, although my mom did have MS with multiple sclerosis and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I like accompanied her to doctor's visits at times. and got some exposure to the medical profession that way. And I think that's probably what sparked my interest. But then due to kind of general circumstances in my home, my stepdad was an abusive drunk, and it just didn't seem like the place to stay. So I left and I dropped out of high school because I needed to work. So I worked full time. I worked at random hospitality jobs, cashier jobs until I was 18. And then I worked in the hospitality industry, waiting tables predominantly. And, I had very little skill set. So I slept on couches. I lived in my car for a month in between apartments. Took a little while to really get my feet under me. But once I did, I finished high school at a community college, and I finished when I was 17. So I finished a little bit early, about 6 months prior to when I would have graduated high school. And then my goal was to go to community college, but despite being legally independent, I could not apply for financial aid independently until I was 24. And there was really no one to help me with that. When I asked, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't have access to my parents' tax information. They said, figure it out. So I thought, okay, well, that's just like not an option. So I'm not eligible for that. So I need to figure out what else I'm going to do with my time. And so after that, when I was 21, I had a coworker who had worked for a program called the Armed Forces Recreation Center, or AFRC for short. And basically it's a hotel and a recreation facility for military personnel and their families, people who are stationed in Europe predominantly, and they would come and vacation there. And so I applied to be a waiter. And they said, no, you're going to work in our ski lodge. And I'd never seen snow or mountains. So I was like, okay, sure. That sounds like a great idea. But I spent 18 months there. And in my free time, I got to travel around Europe. And it didn't make a lot of money and I worked a lot, but I did get to see some incredible sights. And these are pictures from Garmisch-Partenkirchen, the town that I lived in. It's in the Bavarian Alps. The highest peak is there. That's the Zugspitze in the background here. And then this is Lake Eibsee. So it was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous place to live. And, I still wasn't sure about college as an option for me. Thought, okay, well, I'm going to go get my scuba dive instructor certification in Thailand. And so that was my goal at that time. And then after my 18-month stint there, I decided I was going to go work for another program called Lindblad Expedition. So they're partnered with National Geographic and World Wildlife Fund, and they do eco cruises in Alaska in the summer, and then down in Baja in the Sea of Cortez in the winter. And so I took a job with them with the hopes of saving money. You live on the boat. I lived on a boat for 6 months. I slept underneath the water in the hull of the boat there. And that's actually one of the boats that I worked on, the Seabird. And these are different pictures. These are from Google because I actually ended up losing all the pictures I had taken, but you can get a sense of what the trips were about. And so it was a wonderful way to reconnect with nature and spend a lot of time in it. And this is a 152-foot boat with a crew of 24, a maximum guest load of 70. And so in such a small little bubble like that, you have a lot of time to reflect about what your goals are, what you want to be, what you want to do, how you want to spend your time. And I thought to myself, I might be selling myself short if I go and get my scuba dive instructor and I license, and I don't at least give myself the opportunity to go to college. My mom had not gone to college, and my stepdad, who I was not close with, had a PhD. But I didn't really have anyone to help me navigate how to go about the process. But I thought, I'm going to give it a shot, and still wasn't thinking medicine at this time. I thought I wanted to study psychology and help counsel queer adolescents, queer youth, and maybe do addiction counseling as well. Because I felt like if I'd had someone, around to talk to when I was a teenager, I may have made different decisions. A large part of me getting emancipated was I was pretty sure I was gay, and I lived in a very homophobic household. And so I just didn't didn't feel like that would be a safe environment, and had a lot of internalized homophobia. So that was then my intention. I got off the boat in 2005 and I moved to Portland. And I lived there for 3 years. It took me a little while to kind of get situated. So I worked for 2 years, again, working in hospitality jobs, and just kind of trying to work it out. Like, how would I go to school? How would that work? And then in my 3rd year in Portland, I enrolled in community college at Portland Community College. And with the hopes of studying psychology, but I knew that my dream school was UC Berkeley. And the thing that appealed to me about it was its rich history of the free speech movement and like liberal politics. And, it's a good education, a premier place to study science. And I thought, and it was in the Bay Area, which is also somewhere that called to me. And so I decided to leave Portland and move to Santa Cruz. And I was with someone who had lived in Santa Cruz. And so, most of my path have just been kind of happenstance. Like, I moved around a lot, but it was because someone would tell me about a job and then I would go get that job. And then, while I was in Germany, someone told me about Lindblad. And so then I applied. There's a lot of back and forth between those two companies. Portland was one of the places we would port on the boat when we were transitioning from north to south. And so I got a taste of it and I thought that would be a fun place to live. And so I moved there when I got off the boat. And then, so this friend told me about Santa Cruz. And so I moved to Santa Cruz, and there I went to Cabrillo College. And, I can't speak highly enough about community college. I think it's incredible because one, like when you're in a big university, you have classes with like 300, 400 people, like entry level classes. They're huge, and you have like TAs in smaller group classes sometimes, but you don't really have like the same access to the teacher that you do in community classes, which is 30 students usually. I love my time in Cabrillo. It was there that I took a biology of psychology course, and and sorry if there's background noise, my cats are in here with me, and they're rambunctious, but took a biology of psychology course, and I just loved studying the brain at the molecular level. I was in my teacher's office like every day wanting to talk about stuff, and which is not something that can happen in big universities generally. And he was like, "You're studying the wrong thing. You should be studying biology. You should be studying neurobiology and science." And, I thought that over, and I thought that made a lot of sense. So about halfway through my first year at Cabrillo, so I'd almost finished a lot of my general education for psychology to transfer, but I realized, okay, this is what I really want to be studying. So it's going to delay me significantly, transferring and getting a degree, but that's okay because it's what I really was interested in. And then once I had made that switch, I took a biology course, and I started to reconnect with the idea of being a doctor and pursuing that. And I made a friend who was pre-med, and there was no pre-med club at Cabrillo at the time. And we had a biology professor who taught both plant and animal biology, and he was very supportive. And so we started a pre-med club, and then through that I started volunteering at a free health clinic called the Rotocare Health Clinic, and kind of seeing what types of patients and pathology were coming through the free health clinic, and that access to care was limited to the population, and very preventable diseases were and treatable diseases. You were seeing serious complications and sequelae of them. And this just deepened my interest in medicine and working with underserved communities. And throughout the process of being at Cabrillo, I was waiting tables and working. And so balancing working and being a full-time student was tricky. But, the thing that I really liked about the service industry is that you could often have some flexibility with your schedule. You could make a lot of money in, short periods of time, make more money when you need to, or less money when you don't. And so there was that flexibility to really like hustle and grind at school. And so I was able to graduate from there. And because I changed my major, I had to do 2 years of biology. I had to do a year of general chemistry and organic chemistry, and I had to do all those prereqs. So it took me 3 years at Cabrillo. So a total of 4 years in community college to get all the things that I needed to transfer. And then the thing about Northern California that's fantastic, and I guess maybe all of California, I don't know, probably all of California, but they had the IGITSE. So the IGITSE was this agreement with, I guess not the UC system, but the California state university system, and some of the UCs actually, where you could automatically get into them if you had completed all the IGITSE requirements. And so you have the Bog Governor's waiver. I mean, there are like so many wonderful things about community college here in California. And so you don't go into a ton of debt going to community college, and then you have guaranteed admission to college. And UC Berkeley is not one of those schools that have guaranteed admission, but so I applied to multiple UCs, and I got into a couple, and I got into Berkeley, and I had a free ride to UCLA. It would have been completely free, but it wasn't the school of my dreams. And so I went to Berkeley, even though I would take out not super significant loans, but I took out a lot of loans. I was also fortunate enough, so I graduated, I got an AA in math, chemistry, and biology, because at the end of it, I'd taken so much of it. I had applied for this scholarship called the Peggy and Jack Baskin Foundation Scholarship, which is given to community college students. I think it might be on the next slide. Yeah. Which is given to community college students, and they paid $20,000 for the next 2 years, which covered a significant portion of my scholarship and living expenses. And then I took out scholarships in loan. I took out loans to cover the rest. And so I got a couple other scholarships to Berkeley as well, like smaller ones. But the beauty of that is that I didn't have to work during those 2 years, which is great because I could really grind. And I graduated community college with a 4.0. So, and then, which I just mentioned, because I know like sometimes that's kind of questions about what did you do to get in certain places. So just like letting you know. And so with the scholarships, I was able to just take all the upper level courses that I wanted. I did take some intro. I had to start physics. Sorry, my cats are hissing at each other. Hopefully it's not too loud. Had to take physics, all of my physics at Berkeley. And so that's when I was in those big, 400 student classes. And I was just so grateful for my community college education and the access to my professors that I had. And so once I got to Berkeley, I did a biology fellow summer program as a fellowship to kind of intro to research. And I found a mentor. So it was the summer after my first year. I found a mentor in a genetics lab studying regeneration in Drosophila, which are fruit flies. And so I did my research for the next year. I did a senior honors thesis project studying regeneration in fruit flies. And so, I didn't get into research really until until the summer after my third year, even though it was my fifth year, right? And because that first year I had been looking for research projects, but I really wanted to focus on my studies, because I wasn't sure, how rigorous it was going to be, and I didn't want to overcommit myself. And so I was still volunteering at the free health clinic, but I really just wanted to focus on my classes. And then once I had gotten the hang of that, I then thought that I could start adding things in. And I will say, like, there were some incredible counselors at my community college that helped me. And there were some great counselors at Cal that helped as well. But I find that those are, like, sometimes few and far between. So if you find yourself with them, like, count yourself lucky. And if you find someone that's not helping you or not giving you good advice or not supporting your goals, then just go to someone else and find someone who will. And then, so anyways, I did research. These are beautiful pictures of Cal. Let me get rid of these. So the library, the campanile here in the background, you can see Athena, who's at the door of the library. But I spent most of my time here studying Drosophila, like I said. So these are the discs that become the structures once they go through metamorphosis. And these are some pictures of my research and staining different cells and enzymes. And then this is my mentor, Linda Setiawan. She was my grad student that I worked with in the lab. She was instrumental and super supportive and really taught me everything. Check the chat, make sure I didn't miss something. Oh, cool. Nice. I like it that you're annotating things. So she was great. This was me on graduation day, super excited. And I went through a breakup. So I had planned on taking the MCAT during the summer between third and fourth year, between my years at Berkeley. But I went through a breakup, and I was living in San Francisco, and I moved to Oakland. And with all of that in my research and stuff, I just didn't feel like I could study adequately for the MCAT and then be able to take it and do well. So I postponed. And then my goal was to take it in the summer after. And then realistically, I thought, I am going to need more time to study. And so I can't remember what my next slide is. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's just like the details, what I did my research in, and I graduated. And I graduated with a 3.98, which was my GPA. I got an A-, which I was bummed about, but then ultimately it didn't really matter. And I got some awards at graduation, which were great. And felt like I was really happy that I had followed my heart and gone to Berkeley, and with the experience that I had there. And I really hustled and I worked a lot, but I also, tried to enjoy life and do a lot of fun things. So I said, okay, I need some more time. I'm going to get a job. So I took a job working as a living caregiver doing stroke rehab. So in this top right corner, that's Chicken. And Annie. Chicken had been a very active river guide and water activist in California and had a pretty significant stroke. He'd gotten TPA very quickly, and as a result, he had a number of deficits, but the goal was to do rehab and coordinate his care, medical care. So I took that job. I worked half days, and then I studied for the MCAT the rest of the time. And I put here, study or schedule your MCAT earlier, you might be road tripping. So for me, I wasn't really sure when I would feel ready to take the MCAT. I knew I wanted to apply the next cycle. So the in 2014. So I knew I had to take the MCAT that year, but I didn't schedule it in time. So I road tripped to Bend, Oregon, which was actually awesome, and had a really good time, but, it was expensive, and sometimes that might be prohibitive. So I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but if it's not, then live it up. So I was working in Sacramento, or excuse me, I was working in Oakland, living in Oakland, became an aunt during that time. That's Sam down in the lower corner. That's my sister's kid. And she was living in Sacramento. I found out about this pre-med surgical internship program that Jubin actually had started and had been ongoing for a number of years at that time at UC Davis. And it was this program where you applied, you went and you interviewed with a panel. It was kind of MMI style, which was practice for med school. And you would shadow surgical teams for 7 hours a day. And you'd be on different services, and you did it twice a week. And so it was awesome. And I would work, and then I would drive to Sacramento and stay with my sister, and then go do this program. And I followed Dr. John Anderson, who's this trauma surgeon, and I would shadow with the interns or whomever, and just ask them tons of questions about how they got into medicine and how they got into med school, and, essentially the things that you're asking now. And so it was a really great opportunity to kind of pick their brains, which I'm sure they loved when they were super busy and had 40 trauma patients to run them. So then I applied to med school in the summer of 2014, or that cycle. And I applied only to 16 programs because at the time, marriage equality wasn't in all 48 states, 50 states, wasn't in all 50 states. And so I only applied to programs or schools in states with marriage equality. And then I was also limited by money because I didn't have a lot of it. Am I supposed to be watching this Q&A? Do you have any kind of support?
No, we'll take care of it. We'll ask the questions.
Okay, cool. So I only applied to 16, which wasn't the advice I'd gotten from people, but it was a gamble that I was taking. But I felt like my application was strong. I didn't have a ton of extracurriculars, and I didn't have a ton of research, but I had some. And then, I was a non-traditional student. I was 33 when I applied. But I felt like it was kind of the best that I could do, honestly. I really couldn't afford much more. And, was thinking about the travel and the application process or the interview process and all of that. So I got 6 interviews. And these are the schools I interviewed at: UCLA, USC, Stanford, UC San Diego, Iowa, and Dartmouth. And I got into all of them except for Stanford, and I got waitlisted, which Stanford was my number one choice. And what a gift it was that I got waitlisted there, because I ended up, choosing based on location. So I had this, when I was studying for MCAT and when I was when I was applying kind of in that time frame, the person that I was living with, my girlfriend at the time, went on this writing retreat and met this couple who lived in LA, and they were older and had adult children. And they fell in love with her work and had invited us to come hang out with them in LA, and we did. And then their family kind of adopted us into the family. They have a really big extended family, and the matriarch of that family became my adopted mother, basically. So I'd been estranged from my own family off and on, and at this point estranged. So throughout my 20s, I was really on my own and adrift. My older sister, and I reconnected when I moved to California in 2008. And she was also semi-estranged, and then became completely estranged from the family around the time that I did. And so she's the only family support that I've had from my biological family, but this other family kind of like adopted me when I was like 32, and have really been like my emotional and social support since. And so they were in LA, and my sister was in Sacramento. I didn't want to leave her, but I only had Southern California choices, or, I wasn't going to go to Dartmouth because they didn't offer any financial aid, and Iowa was not somewhere I wanted to live. So ultimately I decided UCLA, and like, that was really such a gift. And basically my whole point is, like, so many times in life, I've found that the universe has redirected me, and the things that I thought I really wanted, that I didn't get, I mean, it was a blessing, because there was like something so much better around the corner. And so, if you find that you're hitting like roadblocks and stuff, my personal belief system is that's because like something else is meant for you. And like, it may not make sense at the time, but it probably will later. I went to UCLA, which was awesome. And this is Davine. That's my adopted mom, the one I was talking about, up in the top right. And she came to my coat ceremony, and that's the white coat ceremony there. One of my besties from UC Berkeley was living in LA at the time. He's in the bottom right. His name's Michael. He continues to be a very close friend to this day. And then, LA had a lot to offer, lots of art. That's me at the art museum at LACMA, being a child. There was just like a lot, being by the beach. Southern California had a lot to offer. I grew up by the beach, so it felt like a little bit like coming home. And so while at UCLA, I tried to make the most of my time and get involved. I was the well-being rep on student council for all 4 years. I was interested in medical genetics, so I got involved with the interest group and helped run the selective, which is like a course during a semester. I worked pretty extensively with the ultrasound interest group, was an education coordinator. We threw big like Ultra Fest where we brought in all the students and coordinated different ultrasound like education, different ultrasound, like focusing on the fast, echo, that kind of thing. I volunteered at a lot of health clinics and health fairs, and Anatomy Academy, which is teaching like kids anatomy, kids that lived at the Salvation Army, like housing. But it was just hanging out with kids and showing them someone cared about them. And then I did some research on necrotizing soft tissue infections and some cardiac stem cell research, but like not super heavy in research. I was more towards the end of my time in med school, because again, I was like trying to get my bearings and make sure that I could keep up and do well. Because, ultimately you have to do well, right? You have to do well on your step exam. You have to do well on your clerkships. Tests. I don't know why I can't think of what they're called. So here's just some other pictures from med school. So the top left, that's UltraFest. Those are my other like ultrasound interest group coordinators. And in the middle, that is my friend AJ and I. She also went into general surgery. She's at Harbor, UCLA. That was just, and in the bottom middle, you can see we're practicing suturing on pig's feet, which was one of the like courses with Dr. Dennis Kim, who does ICU Trauma Rounds podcast. He's great. This was me presenting some research on stem cells up in the top right. And then my clinical skills group in the bottom left, which you can see we're working super hard there. So one of the things that I wasn't sure about is like I present masculine of center. So, when I dress up, I wear a suit, I wore a tux to my wedding. I'm like pretty openly queer. I have a septum piercing, I have tattoos, and I just like wasn't sure how any of that was going to be received in a professional setting in med school. And I can say that being openly queer and masculine of center, I feel like has really been taken in stride. I've only had a few weird interactions, and those are when I was interviewing for residency, and the tattoos and the facial piercings. I had mohawks in med school and residency. Most of the time people would be like, oh my God, I love that. Little old ladies love a septum piercing and they love a mohawk. Who knew? And so I really just didn't notice any issues with it. And, there probably have been, but they just haven't been said to me or, so who's to say, but certainly don't let things like that stop you. You're just like, gotta go for what you want. Because if it's not meant for you, it won't happen. And anything meant for you won't pass you by. That's my sense of that. So in med school, I met my wife. So I took step 1 after second year. And then I had 12 days and I was on Tinder, and we met on Tinder. And I didn't think that I would be starting a serious relationship. I'd gotten out of 2 long relationships when I started med school and had been predominantly single, dating some short relationships. But nothing serious. And then I met her and we fell in love. I started third year a week after we met. And then my first clerkship was surgery, and it was 12 weeks and it was pretty rigorous. And we fell in love during that time. And ultimately that was really great, I think, because she had a sense of what to expect, because I wasn't super available in third year. This is a very busy year, a lot of hustle, a lot of long hours, a lot of studying, and she was very supportive of that. And so when it came time to discuss what I wanted to go into, because I was older, I was like 35 when I met her. And I knew what I was looking for. And when I met her, I knew that she was a keeper. And so when it came time to talk about it, to have real conversations about, is she ready to, how she felt about surgery. She was like, if you feel called to it, you have to do it, because not everybody is. And that's special. And I had dated people in the past who weren't supportive of my goals. And that's really hard when you feel like you're like letting someone down constantly, or having to choose between your dreams and someone else, or role obligations. And so finding someone that supports your dreams, and is down to like to hang is super important. And so we got married in fourth year. These are some pictures from our wedding in the lower left, and that's Vanessa, my wife, in the lower right, the day we got engaged. Those kids in the middle there with us on our wedding day are my sister's kids. She had more. And so we got married. So I'll say fourth year of med school is incredible. And they talk about it in this storied way, and like every year of med school gets better, but like the first half of fourth year is super stressful, because you're putting in your application, you're getting your sub-Is done, your sub-internships, you have to do well, you're getting your letters, it's still a stressful time. And so like planning a wedding on top of that was a lot. But ultimately it was like a beautiful, beautiful wedding, and we got married in October. And then I started my interview season. And so I applied to 25 programs. I only applied to the Southwest because to me, staying in that geographical location was important, because my sister actually ended up moving with her family to LA like 6 months after I did, when I was deciding between LA and San Diego, because that's ultimately the 2 UCs that it came down to for med school. She was like, oh, why would you move to LA? And I like a little bit disdainful. And then her husband got a job there 6 months later. So that was also why it was such a blessing that I ended up in LA. And so she was there and close, and I got to spend a lot of time with our kids. And And that was really important to me. And so staying in the Southwest as well. And again, 25 is lower than was recommended to me to match into general surgery, but I felt like that was those were the programs I was interested in, and I didn't want to go somewhere I didn't want to go. And I felt like my application was hopefully strong enough. And again, it's a gamble. I got 22 interviews. I went to 16 of them. And this was still when you traveled for interviews, so it was super stressful. And, sometimes I had like 3 interviews in 3 days in 3 different states and was just barely getting to the meet and greets. And it was a really interesting experience too, because there was just like a time where I had to come have like a real conversation with myself about like, what do I want? Do I want to go to the program that feeds my soul, or do I want to go to the program that feeds my ego? Because those two weren't necessarily the same thing. Like, do I want to go to the most prestigious program and place, or do I want to go to the one that I felt the most at home, that I felt like all of my goals and objectives could be met? Which, were a slew of things which I can talk about more. Basically I just wanted a program that would keep all the doors open for me, where I could match into a good fellowship. I felt that, had a good rapport and camaraderie between the residents. I think that, okay. And so basically, like, choosing the program that was best for me, or the most prestigious. And so I chose UC Davis as my number one choice, because I felt like it had all the things I was looking for, and I liked the residents the most, to be honest. And I had a taste of it when I did my pre-med surgical internship. And Sacramento is not a place I ever wanted to live. But it has a lot of wonderful things for residency, which I can talk about. And so I matched between submitting my match list and match day. We went on a month-long honeymoon in New Zealand and Tahiti, which was paid for by Wedding Gifts. And it was incredible, because it took my mind off of like, oh my God, where are we going to be? Because the match is kind of like a ridiculous process, where it's up in the air and you have no idea where you're going to spend the next 6 years of your life. And I was lucky enough to match at my number one choice. And so Davine was there for match day. Davine also walked me down the aisle. This is my sister, Megan. She was there for match day, and it was really a joyous occasion, although they were both crying because we were leaving LA. But and it was bittersweet to be leaving, obviously, but also joyous. So I graduated in 2019, and in med school I hustled and tried to do as well as I could. I got into AOA, which is Honor Society. I got into the Gold Humanism Honor Society, which was really a wonderful honor, because you're nominated by your co-students, and then got some awards at graduation. And these are just some of my med school colleagues down in the bottom right. Davine and I at the AOA induction, bottom left, and then graduation day with my sister and her family, and Vanessa and Davine. And Vanessa and I knew that we wanted to start a family early, and so we decided to do that, and we used a known donor, which was a whole process. But we knew we were pregnant when we graduated, and then we went to UC Davis. We moved to Sacramento. This is the beginning of intern year. These are my co-residents in my class up in the top left. It's a class of 9 residents. So one of the things I wanted in residency was a big class, not too big, but big, because if you have a lot of residents, then you have a lot of opportunity for kind of tailoring your own experience, sometimes having electives, having coverage. If you have, life events where you need time off. UC Davis had a lot of residents who had families and kids. They're family friendly. They have more than gender parity there. So in every class of 9, it's more females than men, which is very rare in surgery. There's a lot of women in leadership, including the chair, who is Diana Farmer, well-renowned pediatric surgeon. There were a number of LGBTQ residents as well. And then the big plug for Sacramento really is that when I was thinking about residency and what did I want life outside of residency to look like, I wanted life to be easy. I wanted to be able to park. I wanted to be able to drive. I didn't want a lot of traffic. I wanted there to be good weather. If I only had one day off a week, I didn't want it to be terrible weather. And then the cost of living was better because in California, what's the word I'm looking for? Your salary is very similar. Pardon?
Housing is expensive.
Yes. And so thinking about the cost of living in different places in California, and when your salary is almost the same, other than Stanford, which gives you a bigger stipend, because Sunnyvale is ridiculous to live in, there's not a whole lot of housing stipend. And so thinking about, how far is your money going to go? And so we got a 2-bedroom house where we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment in LA, with a big yard. And so that was really important. And then the other thing is like the residents, like when I was interviewing, I liked some residents at a program, some I didn't really vibe with. At UC Davis, I felt like all of them were gregarious. They seemed happy. They seemed to enjoy each other. And I wanted that. And so you can see we made some funny memes during our first week where we're like getting to know the hospital and and we have surgery school, which is protected education time, and we're in groups. And so, it was like a silly bunch. And so I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And then this is my first month of intern year in the bottom right with Megan and Kevin, who are both in my class. Kevin actually decided that surgery wasn't the life for him after second year, and he's now a flight surgeon in the military, which happens more often than not. Not more often than not, but happens more frequently than you think. People will switch residencies, which I wasn't aware of, but like it does happen, or they finish a residency and do another residency. And so, no matter where you're at the process, you're never totally locked in, right? And so like continuing to like reflect and check in with yourself, is this really what I want? Is this really like the path for me? I think is super important. Again, I said we were pregnant. We knew that. The nice thing about my program too is I told them, like, as soon as we found out we were pregnant, I was like, hey, I know that we're not supposed to make a vacation requests as interns, but I'm having a baby in early January. Is it possible to get some vacation around that? And they were super supportive and lovely. And we're like, absolutely. Here are 2 choices. And in the top right, this is my residency class threw us a baby shower. We had another one in LA, which was super sweet. And then Victoria, our daughter, was born in January of 2020, which, yes, was like 2 months before a pandemic. So we had been nesting, and then we just kept on nesting for 2 years, which was not what we expected. And as no one expected. And so having a baby in the middle of intern year, I didn't really know what to expect with that, but I was obviously thrilled. And I can say like, it was a big change in what my life looked like. And my life looks really different than the other residents in my class who don't have kids, because I'm the first one in my class to have them. But about half of the class were in committed relationships. 2 of them are married. One of them is getting married in like a month. And then the other half are single. A couple are in relationships now, actually, that have developed since they've been here. And every class is a little bit different too. Like in terms of the composition of married with kids or single, or like how socially active they are. And my class was very socially active the first half of the year. Excuse me. And we spent holidays together. We did a lot of things together. And then COVID really changed that, unfortunately. And so it's a little bit harder. And then also when you're like all working, you never have everyone off. And so kind of it becomes a little harder to hang out all together. But and then so yeah, this is Victoria, and she is 2 now, and that's her last Saturday in the lower right. And she's been the best thing that ever happened to me, and really a huge source of joy through the pandemic, and through residency too, because I can't wait to get home, even if I'm exhausted, and spend time with her. Obviously, it makes it a little bit harder when I have to work late and miss days with her, or I'm on call a lot, and oftentimes, I come home and I see her for an hour and I put her to sleep, and then I go back to work, or I work some more at home. And that's just kind of the way that is the reality of residency in medicine. But it's doable, and we have a really great relationship, and my wife does the lion's share, and she's actually pregnant again right now, which is a blessing. And so we're kind of navigating that with a 2-year-old and morning sickness and residency. But basically my point is, like, anything is doable, and life doesn't stop. And for female surgeons in particular, female residents, when they wait to start their families until after residency, it can be hard to have a baby, and it can be expensive to go through fertility treatments and IVF. And so one of the things you can think about when you're going to med school or going into residency, if you're a female, is or if you're a woman rather, is if they have any type of funding or subsidizing fertility treatments, or freezing embryos or freezing eggs, because that's something that you have to consider. And then, making sure you find programs and schools that are supportive of students with kids or residents with kids, and what type of, leave they offer, and what type of supportive infrastructure they have for that. Do they have daycares? And if you have spouses, do they have resident spouse groups and things like that? Obviously, COVID has kind of made everything topsy-turvy. A lot of things have become defunct. But, in the future, these are all things to think about. And then here's just some fun pictures of surgery, because surgery is amazing. And like for me, I'll say, so I did that pre-med surgical internship before med school. I was very interested in surgery, came into med school thinking surgery, spent the first 2 years in medical school talking myself out of surgery because I wanted a family and I wanted a life, and I love art and I love music, and I wanted to do all these things. And turns out a pandemic is going to make that harder. But I started my clerkships 3rd year with surgery. Day 1, I scrubbed into a hemithyroidectomy. I got to put my finger on the innominate artery through the neck, and I was so excited I almost cried. And I was like, oh God, there's no way I would want to do anything else. And then I did 12 weeks of surgery, and then I did pediatrics right after that. And so it was, and I tried to stay very open to all my other clerkships, but it was very evident to me what my path was. And so again, that was like another conversation with my wife about, she wasn't my wife at the time, but like, what does that really mean? And what does that look like? And what are the expectations? So here I'm doing a kidney transplant last year with Dr. Perez, who's the chair of the transplant department, chief there, excuse me. And you can see the kidney there in the kidney basin. The picture in the top middle is I was removing, in the bottom middle is taking a gallbladder off the liver bed with the robot as an intern, which is incredible. Doing some liver surgery in the lower middle right, and then that transplant surgery. And then this was just the surgical oncology team last year, which is what I'm on now as well. So, and some fun poses. We have a good time. And I think that's it. I talked for a really long time. Hopefully we have lots of time for questions too. I'm happy to discuss anything you have questions about.
I can start with the first one. The first one is, did you have any kind of support system from friends while in Europe and college? And if not, how did you not feel alone?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had friends, but when I moved to Europe, I like communicated with one person, but it was also like 2002, before the iPhone. They didn't really have FaceTime. It was like email. Telephone conversations were quite expensive. I had limited time to a computer. So like emailed a little bit. I had a friend that would send me VHS tapes of a show we watched together, which was really sweet. But I made new friends there that I'm still friends with. But I definitely felt alone at times. In school, I had coworkers. I was in a long relationship for 4.5 years, and then another one for 3, kind of back to back. And that was the first one was during community college, and ended after my first year at Cal. And then the next one was through my second year at Cal, and the time I was a living caregiver. So I had a romantic partner who, and often that was a source of support. But they were not, they were not in school, they were not in college, they were not applying to med school, they were artists, and so they didn't really have they didn't have experience with it. So I tried to use what I could for emotional support, and then go and talk with the school counselors to try to get direction. And my the teacher who was our pre-med club like sponsor had some advice, but he was a PhD. So I really didn't have any doctors to talk to until I went to the pre-med surgical internship program.
And we have a question from an attendee who's wondering, how are your math skills before starting at CC?
I didn't have any. I took an entry exam, and then I got placed into a community college, and I got placed into like kind of pretty low level math, but then I like sorted it out. I'm pretty good autodidact, so I would read the book and it made sense. And I actually really like math, so I did well in math. I just didn't have any background in it. And it'd been, I don't know, 12 years since I dropped out of 10th grade. So or 10 years since I dropped out of 10th grade. And so I took pre-cals in 9th grader, but didn't retain that. So I had to work up to it. But then I took, a year and a half of calculus, and it was fine. But so whatever level you start at, you just do, and then make your way through. And if you take out the equation you take out the, like how long it will take you, and just do the work and do the best you can, you'll get there. You just can't be tied to a timeline.
Another question was, how did you balance your work-study lifestyle?
Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other. How did I balance sorry, what?
Work and study, like work and study time.
Oh yeah, that's tricky. I mean, I didn't have like a robust social life. I studied a lot, and I'm proactive, so I don't like deadlines. It makes me uncomfortable. So if I got an assignment, I would do the assignment right away, right? And like take it off my plate, because if I have a long to-do list, like I have pretty high anxiety, which I'm learning in med school and residency. And so I have to meditate a lot and pray, because otherwise I'm just like frantic. And high levels of anxiety can be paralyzing at time, and I haven't experienced that. Thankfully, I don't have like an anxiety disorder or panic attacks, but that's possible. And I did see fellow med students kind of crash and burn because of like mental illness and those things kind of manifesting. So that's a real, something to really like, when you're reflecting, if you're noticing those things coming up, to reach out and like try to get some help and figure out what resources are available to you earlier. But shoot, I forgot where I was going. So anxiety, doing it right away and taking it off so you don't have this long list of to do, because that creates too much anxiety for me. And then, I worked to pay the bills, but just didn't have a lot of extra, right? So I was like living pretty frugally, and that's just like about prioritizing what's most important to you. And at that time, I really only had to prioritize myself and paying my half of the bills.
And one question is, what are your thoughts about taking a gap year?
So I would say if you went from high school to college and want to go to med school, definitely take a gap year, take 2, because the thing is like, you need time. And all these are my own thoughts. You need time to like just work, go home, relax, have an evening, have a weekend. Do not be studying, do not be doing homework, because once you go to med school, you're in it forever, right? There's always another hurdle. It's med school, it's getting into residency, it's residency starting, it's fellowship, it's work, and you're going to be working your butt off. And so like, give yourself some time to relax and like go work a real job. Some people get to medical school and then get to residency and have never worked a real job, or have never like had financial independence, have never lived on their own, have never done like really basic things like, oh, I have to like supply toilet paper to my own home. And so
Being an adult.
yeah, I think all of those things are super important, and they're going to help you be a better resident. They're going to help you be a better doctor. And like, my work experience was invaluable to me. And some of the life experiences I've had, I feel like are as well. And so I think 100%, if you have an opportunity, you should do it. But that's my opinion.
The other thing is that a lot of people don't have an option studying for the MCAT, having to pay bills, having to pay. I mean, how much does the application cost? Just
So much.
even if you get the FAP, you still have to pay for your, so gap years are economic, social, study for the MCAT. Like, there's no way that, some people are taking 16, 18 units at a UC and then also telling you, oh, well, I'm also studying for the MCAT. And it's like, I mean, unless, out of 168 hours, you're like studying and going to school and 162 of it, then maybe you're able to do it. But most functioning people can't do that. So a gap year is something that you may not have an option. And an average for the allopathic schools, its average student is 27.3. So a lot of people have taken gap year. So you won't be the first person that's going to take the gap year, and you won't be the last one. So
yeah. And so my best friend in college, the girl that I started the pre-med club with, we both went to Cal. We studied the same thing, and she was able to take MCAT in between because she had a different life. She didn't need to work, and she had time. And so she went, I think she took 1 year. She actually still took a gap year, instead of 2. And I just like marvel at people who can do it all, because I couldn't. And also I didn't want to like half-ass anything, part of my language. I wanted to do the best I could at everything. And so for me, that meant taking more time.
The next question someone asked is, did you have any struggles as a non-traditional student, for example, taking exams and boards, connecting with classmates who may be younger, ageism in the clinical setting? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was like 10 years older than like at every stage, because in community college, I was 10 years older than most of the students. And then, and so I mostly connected with other older students. But then I remember I was like in OChem with a 13-year-old, and I was like, what is life? But whatever, like it didn't matter at that stage. And then med school is also about 10 years older than a lot of my peers. And so I tended to bond with a little bit older students, and I didn't drink. And so like what I wanted to do with my time was different than say a 23-year-old as well. Not that all 23-year-olds drink, but I kind of had like done my partying in my early 20s. And so I would go dancing twice a week the first 2 years of med school. And then I would go home at 1 and then go to sleep. And so, it was doable, but I tended to just kind of hang out with the older kids. And then like, in med school, there was kind of like a group of queer med students who all hung out together. And so we connected over that, and we were like really quite social. So I didn't feel like that impacted me much. The ageism, honestly, the only really like glaring time that came out is I interviewed at a school in Arizona, at a residency in Arizona. And I interviewed, and this guy really left a bad taste in my mouth. And he was very sexist about being a woman in surgery, about being older in surgery, about the length of time it would take. And, he brought up all this stuff, and it wasn't stuff that I hadn't already considered, but like ultimately, like I knew this is what I wanted to do, and that I might have to hustle, and it might be harder, like pulling all-nighters at 40 than it would be at 30. Certainly I know that it is. But it didn't matter to me. And he was very discouraging, and I didn't even rank that program because of that. But that was one guy, and then like so many other people were supportive, and again, I really feel like my life experiences being homeless helps me connect with the homeless patients I take care of, struggling. I didn't have health insurance for 10 years and didn't have access to care. So having that understanding gives me a perspective to be able to care for patients with similar experiences. So to me, I don't feel like it's impacted me. But sometimes I think I have blinders on as well, and I just like don't pay attention to that stuff because I don't care about those people.
And then the next question is, was UCLA supportive to medical students who weren't doing well on their board exams, had accidents, or had to take leaves of absence?
That's a good question. I know a number of people who had to kind of take some time out, and who failed step 1 and had to kind of withdraw from their clerkships and retake it. And I don't know a ton of the details. I think there were some things that were challenging in terms of financial aid, and if they were taking an extra year that was unintended, but I can't really speak to the details of that well. But I do know that the Dean of Admissions is speaking in a couple weeks. And so some of those questions may be better asked to her. I think I can say that all of those people are now practicing physicians that graduated UCLA Medical School and are thriving.
The next question is, what are residency interviews like? Is it content-based, and do they ask questions about where you have like your family intentions and your intent of where you want to live?
Yeah, good question. So they're not supposed to ask you about whether you're having kids or anything about your family. And so if they do, it's something to think about ahead of time. Like, what do you want to share? You don't want to lie, and you don't really want to withhold. You have to think about the best diplomatic way to answer that. Like, you're a young female. If you're married, do you want to share that information? Some people don't share any of that information. For me, I just got married. I was stoked to talk about it. Me being queer was in my statement. And I wasn't shy about the fact that I wanted to have a family, because I was asking those questions, but I wasn't like advertising it in my interviews either. It wasn't like what I led with. But I made sure to ask those questions. So I think you just have to kind of make your personal decision about what you want to share and what you don't. And I think, if you're applying and someone asks you, well, like, aren't you going to have babies, or you want to have babies? I think you say, having a family, if you want a family, you can say having a family is something I'm interested in, but at this point, I want to become the best fill in the blank surgeon, medicine doctor, whatever, psychiatrist that I can be. And so I'm looking for a program that will give me this, this, and this in my training. So you can redirect them to what you want to talk about. And you can dodge questions diplomatically as well. But I don't think you always have to, right? Because ultimately you want a program that's going to support you. So if you're interested in having a family, then you need to make sure that program is going to be down for you to have a family. Like, are there other residents? So that's why going to the meet and greets are important and asking those questions of residents too. So, and everybody has their own like sense of how to navigate these questions. This is just my opinion. I hope that answered your question. I can't really see it, so I have a short memory. Let's see if I can find it. Or you can just go to the next one.
The next one
content. Sorry.
yeah.
Is it content based? They want to talk about your application, right? So like the biggest thing is that you are passionate about the stuff you put in there. I know for like residency, well, for med school interviews, they wanted to look at like longevity of your like volunteering or the things that you did. And then like people can tell when you're phoning stuff in. So if you're talking about research that you don't know anything about, they're going to be like, But if you can talk about research and you're passionate about it, it doesn't really matter what it's in, just as long as you can like talk about it and you care about it and you know what you wrote.
And the next question is if you have any advice on studying.
It's a very big question. I would say the way that I studied in college is different from how I studied in med school. And I think one of the biggest challenges people have in medical school is adjusting how they studied. Because like you are just like, it's like the thing that people say is like drinking from a fire hydrant. You're just like awash with so much information, and you just have to figure out how to like take it in and make it work for you. And so you can't write out your notes the same way you did. It's just not feasible. And so I think making that adjustment is what people have the biggest challenge with when they first start medical school. And so because things have to really be more computer based at that point and taking notes. But I think just figuring out what works for you, because everybody is different. And so you have to come up with your own system, and that might be trial and error. And then I think identifying where you're having issues early on and asking for help, and like going and using the resources your school have to figure out, like if you studied, as well as you could, and then you don't do well on a test, and you need to figure out what it is you need to change rather than doing the same thing. Because like the definition of insanity, Einstein said, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And so you want to like make adjustments as that stuff comes up.
The next question is financial aid a stressful factor when while being in medical school?
Yeah, financially is always a stressful factor, because if you don't have scholarships, you're taking out loan that then is going to build on itself and build on itself and build on itself. And so there are some shady loans, right? So like I had some loans that were not going to be feasible for me to pay back. And I got really lucky because I ended up with a personal interest-free loan that paid off my med school debt and all my student loans that I will begin paying off when I stop residency. And that is not a normal thing. And so that is just something that I got really lucky with, because I would not have been able to pay my student loans back because I didn't read the print fine enough. And so what I would say is like, look and see there's so many scholarships people don't even apply for. Just apply for as many as you can. Do Google searches, go to your school and see what are they. Like I didn't know about the Baskin Foundation, and then I went to my school and found out about it and got it. And, that was like a huge amount of money at Berkeley that I didn't have to worry about. And then when you apply, they give you like random scholarships. And then if you do well, you can get some random scholarships. And sometimes you just have to write something really simple, like a statement, and you can send it to multiple. And so it's like doing the footwork. And so you have to be proactive, but there's a bunch of money out there. And then the rest of it, like you just have to be like, well, this is part of the process. I'm going to take out these loans, read the print a little bit better than I did, and then know that you're going to pay it back at some point. And it's just part of the process, unless you have rich parents who like you a lot.
And then the
I
next
don't know. I don't know too many doctors or surgeons that are starving and are homeless or, I mean, struggling. I know people that walk away with $200,000, $300,000 worth of debt, and they're able to drive a nice car, buy a house, go on vacation.
Yes.
It's most people go and take out, $500,000 loans out to buy a house, and are only making $80,000 to $90,000 a year. Well, you're taking out $300,000 out to make $350,000 a year. So it's I think if you're from if you're not rich or first in your family, it may be really stressful, but that shouldn't be it shouldn't deter you, because unemployment for physician is so low that the Department of Labor doesn't even keep those statistics, and you will be fine. It's getting through it and willing to commit the next 10 years of your life. That should be your biggest question. Money should be kind of like, I think, the last thing. And again, that's just my own personal opinion. But always, first generation students are always worried about the money part, and that's like the least thing you should be worried about.
Yeah. So people are always complaining about how much they make as residents. And I mean, after you go through all this school, you think, okay, like my time paid back, but I make more now than I've ever made in my entire life. So, I mean, and I'm lucky, and I have a 3-bedroom house, and we live on one income, and I'm a resident, and we're having a second baby. So that can tell you about, that. And then if I had loans to pay back, we would have a smaller place, obviously, and less rent, and be cutting corners other places, and it's tight, but you can make it work. And yeah, like I do know some people who live with their parents while they're in residency to pay back their loans faster. And so it just depends on like what you want, or they live with a bunch of roommates, or, whatever it is. You can make your life what you want it to be. And then you just kind of do, risk benefit on all those things. Hold on, I gotta let my cat out real quick. Okay, sorry, I know we have not a ton of time left.
Next question is, what's the most interesting surgery you've seen so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've seen a lot of great surgeries. I've seen some really really cool trauma surgeries. They're devastating, but cool. And that I saw one guy who had been shot, and his liver was basically just like cracked in half, and in a big hole in a stellate wound. And he had a diaphragm injury and a lung injury. And so we did an XLAP, and we did a thoracotomy.
Can I just add one thing? Dr. Woods doesn't see surgeries anymore. She does surgeries.
Yeah. And then some emergent, like, resuscitative thoracotomies, where you open the chest to free the heart from the pericardium and massage it. Those are, last ditch efforts to save lives. I think surgical oncology resections are cool. Some of the extremity sarcomas. Pretty much anytime you're in the belly, anytime I'm in the belly, I think it's amazing. I think the bowel is beautiful. Just watching it peristalse, doing any type of bowel anastomoses are my favorite. Making stomas, there's a reason I'm going into colorectal. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of really cool stuff, and been a part of really cool stuff. Doing transplants, kidney transplants as a second-year resident. You're doing the vascular anastomoses, which is really incredible. I don't know that you get that experience a lot of places that early on.
The next question is, as a non-traditional student, how did you overcome fear about asking for help who may be from people who may have more seniority than you, but in age they are younger than you?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, so you just have to take your ego out of it, right? Like who cares if they're younger? They have more experience, they have something to offer, they have something I want, which is, their experience and in knowledge, or their networking, connections. For me, I just try not to have that ego in it. Sometimes it's harder to keep them at like a professional hierarchical boundary because I feel like we're more peers and like we would hang out outside of work, but keeping that line. But most of the time I just try not to have an ego about it, and then it works out.
And the next question is, how do you keep your energy up for this type of demanding residency?
I drink a lot of coffee. I titrate my coffee and water very carefully, but may or may not be succeeding since I did have a kidney stone recently. I do not recommend that.
The next question is, which would you say is more difficult, med school or residency?
Residency, but more difficult because it's more time consuming in that I do work 80 hours, more than 80 hours occasionally. It's averaged over 4 weeks. But that's usually only if there's no day off that week. So like recently with COVID, we had a bunch of residents out, like 18 residents out over a month and a half. There's a lot of coverage, a lot of Q2. So every other day call, and I worked 82 to 90 hours for 3 weeks straight without a day off. But that is unusual. Taking 28-hour call every third day can be taxing. But I'm also doing something I love, right? So like the further you go, the more refined it gets to the things you love. Like in med school, first 2 years, you're studying all the things. In third year clerkships, you're doing all the things. Fourth year, you get to make your own schedule and you get to start like narrowing down to the thing you're most interested in. So you're going into anesthesiology and then you just take things that you're interested in and that will help you with that. And then you are in your first year and you're maybe doing some like random medicine or surgery things. But then you're just doing your anesthesiology, your 3 years or whatever. And so it gets more demanding, but more awesome.
The next question is, first of all, they say, thank you for your presentation. And then they wanted to know a little bit more about your interest in colorectal surgery because they're interested in it. And they want to know more about what type of surgeries you're seeing and why you enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I got to work on this for my fellowship interviews, but it's hard for me to like totally drill down what I love about it. I think I love that there's a combination of big open surgeries with minimally invasive. I think the robot is an incredible technology. It's really cool to be on the console and to use the robot. I like butts and guts, as they say. So I really like benign anal rectal. I think you can really make a significant difference in people's lives and the quality of life. A lot of people have hemorrhoids. They don't want to talk about it, or fissures or other things that significantly impact their quality of life, or incontinence or whatever. And you can do a relatively quick surgery and they'll hate you for about 4 weeks, but after that, they're going to love you, hopefully. And then with the IBD patients, you have some real continuity of care with them. They're terrible diseases, but you can occasionally make it better. I think the oncology aspect of colorectal is interesting. You have colon, you have rectal, you have anal. I think that those are dynamic fields, and that appeals to me. So there's just a lot that I think is great. And I narrowed it down because I was just taking things off my differential. And I narrowed it down because I found that it was the clinic I enjoyed the most. Because like I always hated clinic as a med student, and it was stressful. And it gets way better in residency. It's less stressful. You don't need to like please to get a grade necessarily. And then and some clinics are better than others. And for those, I was interested. I wanted to talk to the people, and that really clarified things for me. Yeah.
The next question is, did most of the med schools or residency programs ask you the same type of questions in interviews, or did they ask weird curveball questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. Excuse me, at least the residencies. Most med schools are MMI, so these like mini somethings interviews, I don't know, some sort of mini interview. And some of those would be weird. They would be like ethical. But in those questions, they just want you to look at both sides and like give an argument for both, honestly. So not like definitively picking something. And if you want more information about that, there's like a whole vast amount of information on what MMIs are and what they consist of and how to approach them. And there are books. Often they just want to talk about your application. So a lot of mine want to talk about my early 20s and those jobs and kind of like how I got to medicine or how I got to surgery. And so just having a clear kind of explanation for that, and you repeat, yeah, it's like the same. And so by interview 12, you're like, oh my God, let's do this. You give yourself mini pep talks.
Okay, our next question is, first of all, they wanted to say thank you for sharing your inspirational story, and that they're a current medical student who's never really considered surgery until now that they're in their clerkship, and they care about life balance, and everyone tells them they're not great with surgery because they're also queer, older, and want to have a baby with their partner in the next few years. So just they wanted to see if you had any insight and what are your thoughts about being pregnant in residency, and again, just thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you that surgery is hard. Residency is hard no matter what residency you're in, but surgery is hard. We work more, we take a lot more call. Well, that really depends on your program, but I'd say we work more hours. We don't have like clinic months where we have a 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 and then have weekends off. Like that just doesn't happen. But like ultimately you do the thing that you love the most. And the thing that I heard like ad nauseum when I was in med school was if you like surgery, if you can see yourself doing anything else and being happy, you should do that other thing. So if surgery and something else are like your top picks and you think you could be happy doing that other thing, do that other thing. To me, for me, it wasn't a question. It was the thing I liked the most. Did I love that the path would be long? No. Did I love that I would have to work a lot? No, but it is required. You have so much to learn. You have medicine, you have surgery, you have open surgery, you have laparoscopic surgery, you have robotic surgery. You have a lot of things you have to learn. You have endoscopy, and all of that takes time. And if you think about it, if you do medicine, that's 3 years. You do a fellowship, that's 3 years. That's 6 years. That's most surgery residencies. If you're going to do a fellowship, if you think you want to do plastics, ENT, well, really plastics, or CT surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, those are integrated programs. That's a much faster pathway to what you want to do. Those are 5 years, but then they almost all fellowship as well. So you just think, okay, like, and the same thing with age, like you're going to be 33 next year, no matter what. Be 33 doing the thing you're most interested in, the thing that you love the most, the thing you want to get up at 4 a.m. for, the thing you want to read papers about, because that is ultimately how you're going to be the most fulfilled and happy in life. Oh, being pregnant in residency. Well, I didn't have to be pregnant. So I think it would be really hard, but I can tell you that a lot of my colleagues are, because we have so many women in my program. Two of my friends had babies or like 2 weeks and then 1 month after us. And it was hard on them physically. Residency is hard on you physically regardless as a surgeon, but they did it. A lot of the female surgeons are having babies. And so I can't speak about the experience of being pregnant, but I know that it's doable. And that if you want a baby, you should just have a baby. No time like the present. Because also in surgery, you're always going to be working a lot and you're always going to be tired. Even as an attending, it never stops.
And then we're getting close to the ending time, but we have a few more questions.
Sure.
Somebody wants to know, they have a mentor that they find very helpful. And if you have any advice on questions, you can ask your mentor to get the most out of mentorship.
I really think that's kind of specific to you. So it's pretty subjective. I think just thinking about like, what are your goals and what is their skill set and what can they best help you with? And then asking them those things. And then you can have more than one mentor. So you can have lots of different mentors, and one is for, social family advice, and one is for work advice. And so don't feel like you're stuck with just the one if you have other things that you need or want, and that they can't provide you with that.
Yeah, and we also had a presentation for about an hour and a half by Dr. Godoy that talked about how to interact with your mentor. So you should probably watch that and get the full.
Oh yeah, Dr. Godoy is wonderful. And he's like a fantastic human and very accomplished.
The next question we have was, what was the hardest part in terms of academics of the undergrad/medical programs, and what was the best part of it?
I think the hardest part was having to, like, I'm glad I did it, switching it up, but having to prolong and do another 2 years, because some of the classes I had to take, because they were IGITSy, they weren't necessarily relevant, but I had to fulfill that like form in order to automatically get into some of the schools, which was important to me. And I'm glad I did it. But, sometimes you're going to take classes where you're like, this is a waste of time. Why am I doing this? And so I would just try to make the most out of it by being like, okay, well, what can I learn? And so I think that was probably the most like challenging thing about undergrad, community college, and then medical school. I don't know what the worst was. Probably just like the anxiety I created for myself. By wanting to like do as best as I could. And I think I could have been kinder to myself and give myself a little more grace. But the best thing was anatomy and clerkships and being with patients and actually having that experience of like caring for patients. And like third year is stressful, but I just tried to be like, okay, what am I going to learn? What am I going to do that I'm never going to do again? Like catch a baby, probably not going to try to do that again. So.
And the next question is, did you ever doubt your academic or talent, or your academics, your talents, or your abilities on your journey?
Oh, for sure. Imposter syndrome is so real. I mean, I have been fortunate to succeed in my goals, but I have also had to face those demons. And I think as women in academia and medicine in general, I think we experience it more often. And sometimes feel like we have to work more to get the same. But yeah, there are often times I thought, well, what if I can't hack it? I still think that, like, what if I can't be a surgeon? What if I can't finish? What if I'm not gonna be able to do it? What if, I'm having some health difficulties? Like, what if this is going to be prohibitive? Oh my God, how am I going to take care of my family? That stuff creeps up. But and in med school, they talk about imposter syndrome a lot and have like classes about it and different talks. And so definitely, and there are like TED Talks. I would go look those up. Get inspired.
We had somebody who did 1.5 hours of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so go listen to that talk. That's because I think everybody experiences it and no one wants to talk about it, or they're talking about it more. But the other thing is I would share what I was feeling with my friends and in med school or in class, and when you're vulnerable in that way, it allows other people to be vulnerable back with you and share their experience, and then you find out like, oh, everyone's having it. And again, the thing for my own belief system is that helped me get through that was like, well, I'm here, which means I'm supposed to be here. Like nothing is happening by accident. So if my God wants me, I wouldn't be in med school if I wasn't supposed to be, essentially. So I'm just going to do the best that I can, and I'm going to do the footwork, and then the rest of it's already been decided, and I'm going to roll with that. And that's probably not super helpful if you have a different belief system, but I think you just have to I think those other things hopefully will help.
I would just add one thing. Being a surgeon is hard work, but also doing a lot of people that do menial job, they also work hard. And so you're going to have to work hard unless you come from wealth, or so just work hard in what you choose, what you love and what you enjoy. Because I know a lot of people that clean houses that work really, really hard. And they're not being rewarded in the same way. So
Yeah, totally. That's great. Yeah, I was a maid. That's what I did I was a maid when I worked on that boat and served meals. I worked in a lot of, jobs like that, where I was hustling and busting my butt. And yeah, it was certainly a different experience. So I think medicine.
you were not as paid as well, and you were not treated as well either. So
Certainly not. I was probably treated about the same at times, but I think you have to find that fulfillment internally, right? Because like you will work jobs and you will work in medicine and it will be thankless and your patient will be screaming at you and you're like, I'm trying to help you, and so you have to. I think to like what I found for myself is that I have to find that own fulfillment internally rather than requiring external validation for it. And that if you want to make money and you don't want to work a lot, that you should not go into medicine, because it is a grind, it is a hustle, it is a lot of sacrifice, but so you really need to want it. Otherwise it's not worth it. There's lots of ways to make money and work and have free time and travel and whatever else it is. But if you want to be, fill in the blank type of doctor and ideally help patients, and then it's worth it. But I think you have to have internal fulfillment for it to be worth it.
The final question is, do you think it is important to have good interview skills or to get into programs, or do you think a strong application is will basically make up for it?
No, I think you need to have people skills, because medicine is ultimately hospitality work, right? So you can have a good application, that's the thing that gets you in the door, but if you are awkward or cocky or quiet, or can't articulate the things you need to be able to, can't make eye contact, don't have open body language, I think all of those things can really make it challenging for you to get in to the programs you want to get into and succeed, because you are meeting strangers every day and talking to them, and like being able to read a room and read people and the situation, and make people feel at ease and trust you in minutes is a lot of surgery. And I think a lot of medicine too. Think about the experiences you've had with doctors and what has felt good or not, and if you felt heard or not, and valued. And because I think it's really important to be that person for someone else, and that's how you're going to succeed. So if you feel like you're awkward or you can't do any of those things, then those are the things you want to work on, because your application will only get you in the door, but it won't get you the job.
I would also add, this is the best example I've ever heard, was kind of like being a race car driver. You could have the nicest Ferrari in the world, but if you can't drive past third gear, you're not going to get anywhere. Or if you don't have any good driving skills, or you could be the best driver, but you're driving a Ford Pinto, and you need to have all those things, because you're going to walk into a room and you may only have 15 seconds before you're touching someone in very intimate places, or you're telling somebody, hey, you have inoperable cancer and you're going to die. And those interpersonal skills are really important. So having service jobs, having jobs that you have to deal with people that are difficult, that's part of it. And you need to be able to have those interview skills, not just for getting into a program, but also dealing with patients every day, or dealing with your attendings that they may just had a bad day, and They may have gotten a fight with their partner, and and you're
Yeah.
going to have to deal with them, and or your co-residents and your nurses that you work with. So having interpersonal skills is not something you just want to do for an interview, but you need to do that for your survival, I think, as a human being. But hey, you could not have those skills as a person, but if you're dealing with patients and the public, and you need to have that. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that incredibly well. You do need those interpersonal skills, how to go along to get along. And there are a lot of personalities, like he said, a lot of different people. And so being able to navigate that and stay unruffled, not react. I think waiting tables is a great practice, because you to do well, right? You need to respond rather than react to people.
If you're showing up to your medical school interview, you've never done an interview for a job or anything, it's gonna be very nerve-wracking and challenging. I know one person to get ready for their medical school interview. She just applied to a bunch of jobs and just showed up to interviews, and she said by the fifth and sixth one, I got a lot better to be able to be in front of somebody and talk about yourself. And it's a skill. It's kind of like the whole argument of 10,000 hours. You need to do, you don't need to do 10,000 hours worth of interviews, but you need to do some of it to have practice. And mock interviews are really great, but I don't think that I don't think it's the same until you have to do it when something's on the line. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's great.
Nobody else, any questions? We're going to let Dr. Woods go. One of them was, do you feel that being an older med student was an advantage or disadvantage?
Yeah, I feel like my experiences have been an advantage, and I had to be older to have those. Like a lot of my work experience and having had my early 20s to kind of sow my wild oats, as old people say. And because then when I went to school at 26, I was ready to really like grind. And I still had a good time. I had a very full life, but I was okay with sacrificing some of the things, like socializing more, or, doing more, or traveling, because I had had the opportunity to do a lot of that earlier. I mean, I still got to do it, just not as frequently. And so, yeah, it's hard because I try not to regret the past. I think sometimes I wish, I were a little bit younger. I wish I had sorted it out a little earlier, but honestly, like, I just don't think that would have been possible. So we'll go with advantage.
All righty. Well, we're going to let you go because I'm sure you have other things that need your attention. And so thank you again, Dr. Woods, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry, I feel like I've talked quite a bit, but this was great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to leave the session open for a few minutes if you want to download any of the things that we posted in the chat. And then after that, we will shut it down.